It is a 4th of July Friday, so let's get to some questions from the listeners.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuning into another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you listen to podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. For you first-time listeners wondering how this channel works, well, I will be bringing you episodes Monday through Friday, 30-minute episodes, as well as 60-second YouTube shorts after each and every Royals game. And then we also have the Royals Postcast, which is hosted by Chance Lebo, and he comes to you live after each and every Royals game for about 15 minutes. Before we dive into our questions, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Gametime. And with Gametime, you can download their app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. So get started today over at Gametime. Well, as you can tell, I'm not in my typical podcasting room. It is 4th of July weekend, so I'm not actually at my house. I'm staying somewhere else with family. So found in a little office that I can answer these questions for about 25 to 30 minutes here. I'll give you as in-depth answers as I can possibly give you. I know we'll have a lot about the trade deadline, a lot about the upcoming series, a lot about what happened in Seattle. So let's dive right into it with question number 1 coming from Morgan. Love you, love your show. What would you think about having a co-host a couple times a week? I believe seeing you with another knowledgeable host would make for a nice compliment to your own strong voice. Well, thank you for the kind words as always. Unfortunately, it is a little bit out of my control. I know I did promise that I'd have more people on the show, and I still do plan on that. In fact, next week, we're going to have Chance Lebo of the Locked On Royals Postcast joining us on Thursday. And then the All-Star week, I believe my plan is to have a guest on every single day of that week, assuming that all the schedules line up. That way, with no Royals games, we can have somebody else kind of acting as that co-host. But it's a fair question. Unfortunately, kind of out of my control in the hands of the bosses over here at Locked On, if there was to be a co-host on this channel. But don't hate the question at all. This one's from Camaro. Can the Royals really pull a 2024 Tigers? This is a fun one to answer because if you are an optimistic fan, this is the team you would be looking to. The Tigers were 8 to 9 games under 500 in August and then played the best baseball among everyone for about the last month and a half. And that propelled them into a wild card spot by 1 game. I will say this. If the Royals are 8 to 9 games under 500 by August, I don't see that happening, not because they wouldn't be capable, but because what Detroit did was so unheard of. I mean, they literally went from a below average team to playing like the Dodgers for the last month and a half. In fact, better than the Dodgers. It's kind of hard to bank on that happening back-to-back years. If you are a Royals fan trying to remain optimistic, it's fine to say that they can be that team and get hot in the second half, but I would hope the Royals get much hotter much earlier than the middle portion of August, leaving them only 40 to 50 games to really do some damage. But I'm not going to rule out the possibility because Detroit was able to do that with a stellar bullpen and some really good arms in the rotation. Next one comes from Braden. There was a lot of talk about changing the lineup. So what is your ideal Royals lineup? Here's mine. Drew Waters leading off, Maikel Garcia hitting second, Cags third, Bobby fourth, Vinny fifth, Salvi sixth, India seventh, Fermin and Rave eighth, and ninth would be Isbell. Really thinking outside the box there. I'm not sure I'd put Drew Waters that high in the order. If I was to put anybody at the leadoff spot other than Jonathan India, it would be Maikel Garcia. I just feel they would have done it by now. I mean, Maikel's been so phenomenal this year, and I feel that they think him hitting right behind Bobby Witt Jr. is a good spot for him. Though back-to-back nights, Vinny was hitting third, and then Maikel was actually hitting fourth right ahead of Salvi. My one change would be that I want Jack Caglione to have more protection. I'm tired of seeing him hit 6th and then he has no protection behind him 7th, because he's definitely not going to see any hittable pitches when you don't have much of a threat in the 7th hole. So I would move Salvador Perez to the 6th hole, and then I'd move Jack Caglione up. I know it's putting more pressure on him, but I believe it's more important to get him that extra protection just to see if it can get him going. Next one's from Chiefs 15. Do you think the Royals will trade for an outfield bat? Some like Kyle Stowers or Jarren Duran. Kyle Stowers would be more likely of that bunch, although I can't rule it out with Boston considering they traded Rafael Devers, and I just don't know what their plan's going to be. Kyle Stowers is a name I really like. And in fact, when I brought it up about a month ago, I was concerned about his regression in the second half, just because he's never been a full-time player before. But he's only gotten better here leading into the All-Star break, and the Marlins have played much better because of it. I want to say they're 8-1 over their last 9. They are now ahead of the Braves in the NL East. So maybe they're not looking to sell off young pieces and controllable pieces the closer we get to the deadline. But I would say that Stowers would be more likely than Jarren Duran. This one's from, I believe, Parker, it looks like. Do you think Santander from the Blue Jays for Lugo and or Lorenzen trade would do us good? I know Santander hasn't had a great year, but just think about the upside. Well, unfortunately, Santander just signed the 5-year deal in the offseason. The Royals wanted him. The Royals offered him a 3-year deal before the Blue Jays stepped in last minute and gave him a 5-year deal worth around $95 million, I think. I want to say the Royals were 3 for $66, if I can recall correctly. So I don't see that happening. I know there's upside there, but the Blue Jays aren't going to unload him in the first year of that deal. And I'm not sure the Royals would want to take on that contract in the first year of that deal, considering how he's looked in year 1 in Toronto. This one's from Robert. Do the Royals have development issues when it comes to position players? If so, where are those problems? Are they in Kansas City? Are they in Omaha or perhaps Arkansas? Are there problems with scouting? Thanks for your time. I would say that it's a combination of a few things. It's hard to work at the minor league level and develop these guys to prepare them for the big league level. Fortunately, the Royals were able to land someone like Bobby Witt Jr. in the draft who was can't miss. I mean, you can help him out a little bit, but he's got so much talent that he's just naturally going to progress into a great hitter. I believe they did a very good job with Vinny Pasquantino. I believe they've done a pretty good job with Michael Garcia. I believe that they, in the past, did a really good job with Salvador Perez. But those names are a little bit of the outliers here because they have not developed a lot of star position player talent. I'm not saying you need that, but just league average talent. It's a combination of, I feel there's been some failures maybe at the minor league level just because they're not 100% ready. But I also would say a lot of it's just on the player in general. Sometimes they're just not as talented. That excuse doesn't really work for those first-round picks, and that's why I look to some of those guys that were first-round talents and just have not been able to figure it out at the minor league level. So if I was to throw a dart somewhere and place some blame, though I know it's a little bit wrong to do, I would say it's probably at the lower to middle tier levels of the minor leagues because they just haven't produced a lot of high-end offensive threats in the last handful of years. Bobby Witt Jr. can't count. He was a can't-miss guy. We'll see what happens with Jack Caglione here, but he barely spent any time down there. And now it's about the big league hitting instructors trying to find a way to help him out a little bit. This one is coming from Braden. Hopefully it's not a dumb one. With no sure thing in baseball, is it better to trade for MLB-ready talent or highly touted prospects, given where the Royals are at? It just seems like prospects are too hit and miss to really believe in proper development nowadays. Thanks for the hard work as always, Jack. Not a dumb question at all. That's a phenomenal question, Braden. So don't look down upon that question. I thought it was very fair. I would say that for where the Royals are at, it does them better to trade for major league ready talent or guys that are already here in the big leagues because they expect to compete next year. And if you expect to compete next year and you go out there and acquire 20 to 21-year-old guys, not saying it's a bad idea, but those guys aren't going to be ready for 2026. And then you got to develop those guys again and try to work your magic and turn these guys into maybe not big-time talents, but just good enough talents. and those that can help in the lineup years beyond 2026. But where they're at, I feel they need to go out there and acquire major league ready talent so that they can help out this lineup this year and next year and hopefully years beyond that. Let's take our first break of the show. When we come back, still a lot of questions to get to next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find us on wherever you listen to your podcast. Before we go any further, I want to tell you about our title sponsor in Gametime. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply, so again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Well, again, a happy 4th of July to everybody out there, wherever you may be listening to this. Maybe it's on a boat. Maybe it's on a drive down to somewhere. Maybe you're just hanging by the pool. Hopefully, I can answer everybody's questions and give you some content before the Royals begin a 3-game series in Arizona a little bit later on tonight. Back over to YouTube, and we are going to hear from, looks like Jason. Is there anyone on the Royals roster or in the major leagues, for that matter, who is faster than Witt going home to third? Thanks, Jack, and sorry if you've been asked this a million times. Never need to apologize for asking questions on here, by the way, because sometimes you ask the same question to somebody else. That's not your fault. I just didn't, leave anybody out. I'm going to answer all these questions in a timely manner. So, no, never apologize for sending in a question here. I would say that there's nobody in the Royals organization that, I guess, from home to third or first to second or just, running in a straight line would be as fast as Witt. In baseball, yes. I believe Chandler Simpson's the fastest guy in baseball, and he would be the one that could beat Bobby Witt Jr. in a foot race. So there's not many out there, and there are a few guys that are very close, if not a little bit quicker than Witt, but I would feel pretty confident saying that Chandler Simpson's the guy that could beat him in a foot race. This one is coming from Logan. Two-parter, should the Royals pursue a power third base bat next season and move Garcia to second, or keep Garcia at third and potentially go after Lau or Torres at second? Or is it more likely they maintain the same infield? No, I would imagine that they would try to shake things up a little bit next season. Michael's been phenomenal, but I do wonder if moving him to second base can allow you to go and find that big-time power bat you desperately need to put at the hot corner. Because as great as Michael has been, his bat doesn't really play for the position. And when you look at third base, that's a spot that you need a lot of power. He just doesn't have that. I would say he could max out at 15 home runs. But I look at someone like Eugenio Suarez, who could be that power bat over at third base. But I also love the idea of Brandon Lau or Gleyber Torres. I'd like Lau a little bit more because I feel Gleyber Torres is going to have this all-star year, which, of course, he's the starting second baseman for the American League. But then I could see him tanking next year. Like somebody gives him the 2 or 3 year deal and it doesn't work out. So I would go Lau if they choose to keep Garcia at third. I know that makes things complicated with Jonathan India, but clearly they made it work going into spring training this year with one of them playing left field. I'd imagine, though, India or whoever they bring in to be more of a DH. What I can tell you here is that if you moved, if you got, I guess how this would work. If you brought in Eugenio Suarez, you could keep Garcia at third, you could keep India at second, and then he would become your DH because you'd have better defense over there at third. But, yeah, I really like Brandon Lau. If they made a play for him, though, I would not be disappointed in the slightest. Wilson's question, how's Joey Wiemer doing? I don't feel like we've heard much about him after a lot of buzz around spring training time. Yeah, I would say that he's been hotter of late. He had a really poor start to the season, which kind of put him on the back burner. Here's where I'm at, though, when it comes to guys playing well in AAA. We've seen it with John Rave. We saw it with Nick Lofton. Cam Devaney was hitting 300. Now he's below 270. These guys that are kept down in the minor leagues while the offense is struggling, always believe what the organization is telling you about those guys. I'm not saying they're 100% right all the time, but when you've got a prospect who's 26, 27 years old and can't get an opportunity at the big league level, it's not that they're a bad player or a bad person. It's just that you believe that their skill set isn't really going to translate over, and you need to iron out some more things before they get that opportunity. So we saw it for years with Drew Waters in Kansas City. He didn't get the chance last year because they felt that he would look more like he is right now than what he was doing in AAA. So for Wiemer, I still like the power upside. I like the defense. He's a big kid. I hope that he and MJ Melendez get another opportunity, considering how many of these outfielders have looked so far in Kansas City. Okay, if I've missed any of your questions on YouTube, just leave a comment below on here because I got to jump over to Twitter. We have about 20 to 22 questions over there. If I missed anybody's, respond below this. I'll have it answered by the end of the weekend. First question on Twitter: do the Royals make a trade before the break? Will we have an interim hitting coach when the second half starts? For the first part here, I'm going to say yes. Oh, man, maybe I might walk that back a little bit. This is real time. I know this is pre-recorded, but I think I just second-guessed myself for an answer. For the All-Star break next week, or I guess it'd be 2 weeks. You know what? I'll keep the answer. I think some form of a move will be made. The smoke around Brian Reynolds, that doesn't really feel like a move that will happen before the break. That feels like a move that would go all the way up until deadline day. But I could see a minor move being made in a trade at that. Maybe it's somebody that's blocked elsewhere. But if the Royals catch fire and start playing well, that would be one of the perfect times to try to strike a deal right before the All-Star break. Or you could try to strike a deal that's over the All-Star break when you're not playing. So don't take that for anything. I'm not having anybody tell me they're working on anything. I'm just saying, for how quiet it's been, it feels almost eerie that a move should be made at some point soon. They kind of come out of nowhere, though. Like, wouldn't it be hilarious if a move was made today? And so my answer would be correct. But don't take that for too much. I'm just rolling the dice here and trying to remain optimistic that some move will happen in the next 2 weeks. This one's from Jerry. If the Royals traded for Reynolds, would you rather they take on all of his income and trade less over to the Pirates, or ask for the Pirates to take a % of Reynolds' contract and we trade over a second or third minor leaguer? Where I'm at is that I think it would be nice to have like a split there, because there's just not too many guys in the system I am so attached to where I would hate for them to trade away. And I feel that JJ Picollo understands the guys that you're not wanting them to trade are guys that he's also not wanting to trade. Like, it's going to take a lot to move Carter Jensen or Blake Mitchell or Ramon Ramirez or David Shields. Brian Reynolds is not that type of player. Maybe one of those guys, but I wouldn't say two of those guys. But if you eat all of that contract, you're definitely not getting any of those guys. You would only be getting guys in like the 15 to 30 range in the system. And it would come down to if John Sherman is all right eating all of that money. But I feel there's a little bit more to it. I don't see the Royals paying all of that contract. I could see them paying about half. And then they do have to part ways with one of those prospects if that deal is made. I'd be more okay with them dealing a Ramon Ramirez because you have three catchers. And eventually, if you are to add to your major league team, you're going to need to part ways with one of those guys. I mean, you're just not going to have all three of them up there in Kansas City and all learning different positions. So pick two you want to keep and then pick the other one and almost showcase him a little bit more in any sort of trade talks that you have. This one's from Ivan. Did we lose any team control by bringing up Jack early? I'd have to go back here because I can't remember exactly which date it was. But I do believe they lost a year. I think it was 1 year they did. Correct me if I'm wrong in that, but that's been the talk in baseball about teams that manipulate the service time so they get an extra year. But for guys like him, top prospects, most teams out there don't really pay attention to that because they feel they're going to have this guy long-term anyway. If he turns into the player you expect him to be, you're going to be giving him a contract extension. And so it's not really going to matter what that service time is. But for some teams out there that will not spend any money, it really does matter. But I do believe they lost 1 year on that by calling him up a week or two early back in June. It was. So, yeah, they did lose 1 year. I'm like 85 to 90% confident in that. If I'm wrong, though, just correct me here in the YouTube comments. We'll take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll wrap it up with our final set of questions next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. A happy 4th of July to all of you out there. Hope you're having a blast, and hopefully you're listening to this podcast in a very comfortable area. You're out in the sun, you're by the pool, you're by the lake. That's where I'm hopefully going to be here in about the next hour or so. So if you ask me any more questions post 12:30, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get back to you until about Sunday after the game in Arizona. Let's get to our next question, which is from Tom. You get an offseason do-over. What would you change if you're Kansas City? I'd sign Gleyber Torres, which I was begging for all offseason, and flip Singer for an outfield bat. What about you? The Gleyber Torres situation is one that I feel a lot of people going into free agency were hesitant on. Like, his numbers were good, but for what he was wanting at the time, teams were just staying away. The Tigers rolled the dice, and I believe the Tigers also had a better lineup to put him in. If Gleyber Torres was in Kansas City, I'm not sure that he puts up an all-star season. And he wasn't really known as an on-base guy, which everybody knew the Royals needed on-base help, and Jonathan India fit that a little bit better than Gleyber Torres did. Now, what happened is happened. If I had this knowledge, then yeah, I would sign Gleyber Torres, and you probably have a much better offense than you do right now. As for Brady Singer, the question would have been, well, what outfield bat could you have gotten? Because I don't believe there were many suitors out there for Brady Singer. There certainly were some, but for the teams that wanted Brady Singer, they just didn't have the greatest outfield depth. And the Royals knew they needed somebody that had a high on-base percentage, could be their leadoff guy. I would have got, if I knew what I knew now, then yes, I would go for Torres. But I really feel that the guys they targeted just haven't panned out. The only one that I would have liked to see them go out there and get was Austin Hayes for this outfield, even though I actually don't know if his numbers have been tanking of late. But I remember Austin Hayes early on in the season was producing at a very, very high rate. And he was a one-year deal. Yeah, he's hitting 284 still. So Austin Hayes with Cincinnati has just been a great piece for them. He's not been an everyday player, but I really feel that it could have helped this outfield a little bit more. So he would be one of the guys that I would bring in just to have his depth off the bench. Randall Grichuk, though he's not been great, the Royals will see him here tonight. As a platoon bat would have been nice considering he didn't get a huge contract either. But nobody else really shined that you felt you really missed out on. But as for the bullpen, like getting Carlos Estevez, bringing back Waka, those were all fantastic moves for the pitching staff. This one's from Joseph. Why can't we do what the Tigers did last year and go on a big run down the stretch? Doesn't hurt anything to try. Some people feel that way, that after last night, an emotional win, a big-time win, can that propel you? I mean, this is going to be crazy what I'm about to say, but they're a half game out of second place in the division, considering how they've played. The Guardians have lost 7 in a row. The Twins are falling off. The Royals have not played good baseball at all, but there's a chance tonight they could leapfrog 2 teams in the wild card race, and now the only teams you're chasing are Seattle, the Angels, and Texas, a Texas team you swept, by the way, and a Mariners team you just split with, and an Angels team you haven't seen yet, but history would tell you they're going to have a bad second half. Maybe it's different this year, though. There's always a chance they could go on a run, but they're not going to be able to do it with an offense that ranks bottom 5. MJ Melendez, believer. Back to the fry question. Oh, I love it. I love the food questions as always. What is your preferred dipping sauce? Now to the less important question. Say we do trade for Brian Reynolds. What do you think would be in the trade package on our end? Starting with the fry question, I would say that I would go ranch is up there, but this goes kind of beyond fries dipping sauce. Freddy's sauce is good. Cane's sauce as well. Cane's sauce might be my number 1 there. Cane's fries, the crinkle cut fries with the cane sauce, number 1. I brought up Red Robin before, the campfire sauce. That's another one. Easy to make at home, by the way, too, if you like to grill out. And then ranch would be the other one I'd throw in there. But number 1 would be cane sauce. Number 2 would be campfire sauce. As for the deal, one of those catchers, I believe, would be included. And I'm sure that the Pirates would be asking on the higher end, like Blake Mitchell or Carter Jensen. But maybe if you ate more of that contract, you would keep those two guys and then unload someone like Ramon Ramirez and a pitching prospect. But really, it comes down to what you're willing to eat and what John Sherman would be willing to eat if that's the move and the route they decide to go to. RJ's question, I am all for not getting too high or getting too low, but the 14 and 15 teams had guys that would be pissed with the offense. It seems like the approach doesn't change for the situation. We need to manufacture some ugly runs when we need them, not swinging for the fence. I would agree with that. This team does have guys that are allowed to swing for the fence, and I would like to see them launch the ball in the air, but they're just not a home run hitting team. So I 100% see your point of why are you trying to hit home runs when you're not a home run hitting team? And there are too many guys in that lineup you can see going for it all. And that shouldn't be happening. It should be line drives. It should be trying to go the other way. The old school high school baseball coach, right? Line drives between second base and right field. Right, if you're from the right side, I guess I should say. Just gap to gap, try to hit a line drive right over the shortstop, right over the second baseman. Easier said than done, though, because it is the big leagues at the end of the day. But there's two guys there that I would want swinging for the fences, and that's Salvador Perez and that's Jack Caglione. Those are two guys that have the most pure, raw power on the team. But as for everybody else, I'm all for scratching across some ugly runs. Any way you can get it done, any way you can score more than 3 runs a night. This one's from Blaze. If the Royals are targeting controllable bats, could Stowers still be a possibility? What about Duran? Funny enough, we got this question earlier on in the show. So I would say that Stowers still more likely than Duran. You could look to Washington. I brought up Alex Call before. He's another guy that I like that could be an upgrade in your outfield. Looking to who else? There was somebody else who brought up a name that I really, really liked. I'm blanking on it now. Instead of running up on time, I'll have to talk about it in next week's episode. But I would say Stowers, again, just a little bit more likely than Jarren Duran. Royals, Jayhawks, Steelers country asked, how likely is a Brian Reynolds trade and what would the package for him look like? So I gave you a little bit of the update on what a package might look like, how likely it is. JJ Picollo is not a smokescreen guy. I feel that when that comes out, there is some pretty big interest in those players. So for now, the Pirates, they probably want to hold on to him because Brian Reynolds has been such a great piece for Pittsburgh and one of their better bats for the last 5 to 6 years. So I'll put it at like 40% right now. Still, I would need to get more smoke because it's more so on the Pirates side. But for right now, I'll put it at like 40%. If the Royals really go on a tear here and go into the All-Star break red hot, that number is going to go a little bit up each and every day and after each and every win. This one's from Aiden. What would it take? Everybody's asking about Brian Reynolds here. I'll go to your second question here. And how many other trades would follow suit for the Royals? If Reynolds does get acquired by the Royals, I would imagine they're going to go after one more player. A name that does come to mind, though it doesn't feel like a perfect fit, and the contract would be a bit of an issue because you're just taking on Brian Reynolds' contract. Adolis Garcia was a name that was also brought up in Ken Rosenthal's piece. That's a power bat that you could look into and another outfield bat, but not sure he's the best fit in Kansas City. If you wanted to go out there and really make a move, Eugenio Suarez would be an interesting name. I mean, that's what's going to be something to watch over the next few weeks here. If the Royals get really hot, I'm not going to put anything past them. I mean, I feel there is a world in which they really get aggressive at the deadline because that was the feel back in June before they went on this ugly stretch. That by deadline time, they were going to be one of the more aggressive teams. If they get back into the hunt and they're within striking distance, I could see 2 or 3 moves being made to bolster that offense. This one's from Beans. What 2 players would you like or expect KC to draft in the upcoming first round? Also, should we expect those first rounders to move through the minors as fast as Jack? For the second part there, I'm going to go no. I don't feel they need to quickly move any of these guys unless they are college bats or college pitchers that just can breeze through. They're basically, AAA guys when you draft them. And I don't see anybody at pick 23 or 28 that can move that quickly. Cruz Schoolcraft is somebody I really like. I also like Gamble, too, who we talked about the other day. There was one more name that I've said this now like 2 or 3 times in the episode. My top two would be Schoolcraft, and then you have Gamble, two prep guys. Just want to see you really go the high upside route when you're picking late in the first round. RJ's question, Trey Mancini absolutely raked in AAA and opted out. What are your thoughts on the Royals bringing him on for the second half? I'm just not really for it. AAA just doesn't mean too much to me, even for a guy that's as experienced as him. The Royals also have a logjam at first base and in right field. You already have Vinny and Jack Caglione. Salvi plays first base. So I would say it's very unlikely that Mancini is brought in. Let's see. Brian's question, what does your 2026 rotation and roster look like? I love your podcast. Keep it going. And as always, thank you for the kind words. Rotation, I would go Reagans, Waka, Bubic, Noah Cameron. And then I'll be honest, I do believe they bring Seth Lugo back. I just got that hunch that he's somebody they really don't want to let go. I believe he really likes it here. He likes the camaraderie. He likes the pitching coaches. I feel that's going to be one of their priorities to keep that rotation intact because it's been the main reason why they've been able to get out of this hole of the last 5 years leading up to 2024 and get back to a competitive level. I know this year's been a little bit of a disappointment, but I feel that Seth Lugo is near the top of their list in bringing back next year so they can keep this rotation intact. This one's from Sam. How do you think the Royals handle the catcher position next year? It's hard for me to want three catchers on the active roster for 2026. Carter, Salvi, and Freddie. If Carter just goes off basically for the remaining parts of the season, there's a chance that with a strong spring training, he could be on the opening day roster. But for now, because I just don't know what they're going to do with Salvador Perez, my guess is that he will still be the catcher unless they go out there and acquire someone else and move Salvi to more of a backup DH role. Those will be the hard questions that they have to answer around November and December of this coming year. David's question, how does a team go about developing an organizational hitting philosophy? How consistent is the message across all levels? And how does it impact draft strategy and hiring of coaches at the MLB level? You want to be pretty connected from top to bottom on what you're trying to preach because you don't want to screw up these guys where at one level they hit a certain way, the next level they hit a different way, the approach is different. So top to bottom, you do want to have similar philosophies, but also at the big league level, you might just have somebody that has a different approach there. So in AAA, you would want to have similar styles so that when you get that guy to the doorstep, he's going to be pretty well prepared once he gets there. But if the Royals have a different hitting coach or hitting coaches next year, that philosophy might change, and you are going to have to shift around some stuff or just tell those coaches, hey, here's how we're going to be going about things moving forwards to try to, shake things up a little bit. Chiefs Fever's question, lots of folks complaining about how Casey didn't do anything to address the outfield in the offseason, but I went back and looked at free agency, and outside of the big names, no one has been that productive. If there's a trade target you think they missed on, they may just have run into a bad market. Or is there a trade target I think they missed on? Not really, as we are talking about. The top guys, the big fish out there, none of them have really panned out. So I don't believe they missed on anybody, maybe other than Gleyber Torres, but I'm not sure they were that interested to begin with. Jerry's second question, Tyler O'Neill is going to be taken off the IL by the Orioles in a day or two. If we can't get a trade for Reynolds or whoever else, your thoughts on O'Neill? Wouldn't take much to make a trade, I would think. Thanks for your great work. Only hang up there is the contract, signed a 3-year, $39 million deal, I believe. So I'm not sure they'd want to take on that deal with the injury history and the struggles that he's had this year. Mike asked, can we be sellers and still compete this year? Seems a good bat could get us in the thick of things. You could. Yeah, if you get the right bats out there and somebody really steps up in the rotation, if you were to move Lugo or Lorenzen, you can have a chance, but those players really have to be game-changing pieces if you're going to continue to contend after selling some of your guys. And lastly, Craig's question, what is the best you think we can get for Lugo? And second, do you think Royals coaching is stunting Cag's growth? Not sure it's stunting his growth because it's only 97 plate appearances or at-bats into his career. You get 300 or so. If he's still hitting below 200, then maybe you are onto something there. As for Lugo, you could get 2 top 10 guys in a system somewhere, but also we have to factor in that he's going to be a free agent. He's got the opt-out deal. He is 35. He's pitching really well. And last year, he also didn't pitch as well in the second half. He struggled, and teams are going to be eyeballing that. So if you think they're going to get an absolute haul, they can get some good players, but I wouldn't say players that are going to really pop to the rest of baseball. Just because 35-year-old guys that are going to be free agents, some teams aren't going to sell the future just for that half of a season of one guy. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We will be off for the rest of the weekend, but back on Monday for a full recap of the series against Arizona and a preview of the upcoming series against the Pirates. But until Monday, you take it easy, Kansas City.